Welcome to the special town meeting. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I've been advised by the town clerk that the warrant has been properly served. At this point, I would entertain a motion to dispense with the formal reading of the warrant. I have a motion to dispense with the reading of the warrant. Mr. Vignani, so moved. Do I have a second? Second? Thank you. All those in favor of waiving the reading of the warrant, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That's a unanimous vote. We will move on to the meeting. The warrant was posted on August 31st, 2022. Under the charter, we need to have a deputy moderator. Peter Toppin, again, has agreed to serve as the assistant moderator, and I would entertain a motion to ratify my appointment of Mr. Toppin as deputy moderator. I need a so moved. Second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Toppin. The town clerk tells me that she has sworn the assistant moderator and the tellers for the meeting, so that has been accomplished and they are ready to go. We have no dignitaries. All right, at this juncture, I would ask the chair of the advisory committee, Jamie Gilmore, to introduce his committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everybody. It's a lovely fall night tonight. I'd like to introduce my committee. We have Elise Russo, our vice chair, Jerry Kelly, our former chairman, Daniel McWigan, Lincoln Heineman, a former chairman, Patrice Metro. They're out of order from the list, so forgive me. Missy Seidel and Linda Ferguson. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. I'd like to just call everyone's attention. A very important piece of handout here is an advisory committee handout. Gives you all of the information in terms of their recommendations, suggested motions. So if you don't have one, I suggest you get one. It would be much clearer to follow the meeting if you haven't taken one. In addition to that, there is a handout, proposed amendments to the charter revision article. In addition to the charter information, which is in the advisory committee handout, there will be a limited amendment that I believe is going to be offered later. So if we refer to that, hopefully you've picked it up and seen it. At this point now, I would ask Tony Vignani, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, to introduce the board and the town council and town finance director, town administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for showing up for this important meeting tonight. I'm going to take a second and introduce you to our team over here. To my immediate right is Nancy Holt, the finance director. To her right is Jim Boudreau, the town administrator. Vice Chairman Andrew Goodrich. Karen Conley on the select board, Maura Kern on the select board, Karen Canfield on the select board, and Cindy Amara, who is town council. Just a quick, I want to thank a few people here. You know, in the past, special town meeting used to just be a housekeeping situation. We'd come in and we'd pass some bills from the prior year. But we are doing so much activity in the town right now that there's a need for this to have more content to it. So I want to thank all of the boards and all of the town employees that helped put this together, particularly the advisory committee who put that booklet together for you. And again, all the town employees that really make this whole thing happen. So thank you all for that. Before I leave, yes. And I just have a little bit of good news before we jump into the articles. I do want to just let you guys know that we have issued or actually received 2 grants recently. The first one is for $437,000, which is going to pay for the purchase of a police boat. And the second one is almost $6 million out of a grant pool of $18 million that is going to be used to pay for 2 of the 4 phases for seawall replacement over on oceanside areas. So great work to everybody that was involved with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would ask Peter Gates, Chair of the School Committee, to introduce his committee and the school administration. You're definitely not Peter. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Hi, Nicole Brandolini. I'm the chairwoman of the Scituate School Committee, and I would like to introduce the other members that are here tonight. Dr. Carrie Barkowski, Mr. Michael Long, Mr. Peter Gates, and also with us we have Superintendent of Schools Bill Burkhead and Director of Business and Finance Bob Dutch.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a number of town employees who have passed since we've last worked together in April. I'm going to read their names and then we'll ask for a minute of silence in their memory. John Reedy from the Fire Department, Arthur Beal from the Historic Commission, George Kenneth Kelly, Scituate Cohasset football coach, Donald Litchfield from the Fire Department, Dennis Clifford, school custodian, Thomas Cosman, an election worker, Jeffrey Frank, who served on the Waterway Commission, and Robert Corbin, a teacher in our schools. I'd ask for a moment of silence to remember those who have passed. Thank you. My name is Jim Toomey. I'm the town moderator. My job is to chair the meeting, decide questions of order. I generally do not vote on articles. Let me take a couple of minutes just to outline the basic rules that we're going to operate under here tonight. We have 2 branches of government in Scituate: the executive, represented here by the selectmen and the school committee. The town meeting is the legislative body. The executive branch, who are members who are guests here today, have made requests asking for your approval. These requests are made in the form of the articles in the warrant. The purpose of the meeting is to allow you, citizen legislators, to review these executive branch requests. You're within your rights to question the executive branch, act upon the requests as you see fit. This is your meeting. It's not an executive branch meeting. It's for the voters to decide these issues. One thing I'd want to point out to you is you have an ally, a very special friend in the advisory committee. The advisory committee is charged with reviewing each and every article and making a recommendation to the meeting as we go through all of the articles. A great deal of homework goes into the recommendations from the advisory committee. They speak with the proponents of the articles. They do their research. They gather the information, and then they vote on whether or not, what kind of recommendation to make to the town meeting. It's a very considered, deliberate process. We have people, a diverse committee who works very, very hard. So I suggest to you that you listen carefully to what they say. It's not binding, but I think it's very helpful in terms of how to evaluate what you have before you. Procedural rules that we operate derive from state law, the parliamentary manual called Town Meeting Time, the charters, bylaws, and most importantly, custom. Quick summary. All non-voters, except consultants who are working with the town board, sit in the non-voter section here. Ordinarily, only registered voters are allowed to address the meeting. However, I'll assume the consent of the meeting if a non-registered voter, a person who is not a registered voter, would like to address the meeting. If anyone objects in a given case to the non-resident or the non-registered person, speak up, and then we'll have the meeting decide whether it's appropriate or not. In order to address the meeting, you rise to speak, come to one of the microphones, and identify yourself by your name and address. This shows those present courtesy and respect and helps in keeping the meeting minutes. Speakers representing a board, group, or a client should state this relationship as you identify yourself. The way this works is there is an article in the warrant. That sets the subject matter which we're dealing with. Motion is then made, and it's the motion on which a vote is taken. The motion is the actual action which is to be taken under the article. The motion must be within the scope of that article, and it must be seconded. Once that happens, people are free to debate the issue. Again, come to the microphone, speak once you are recognized, and always address the meeting through the moderator. If you have questions of town administration or of a town board, feel free to ask them. I will ask them through me. I will direct them to the appropriate person, board, and they're free to answer, not answer, and you can make your judgment based upon what response you get, but you're entitled to that information. You're entitled to ask those questions. Our time limits that we've traditionally used are 5 minutes on the first round of discussion on an article and 3 minutes on the second. At our last meeting, we learned how long 5 minutes is, so I'd strongly urge you that you can say a lot in less than 5 minutes, and hopefully we won't get to that end other than something that's complicated and this initial presentation, such as the charter. Other than that, brevity is the soul of wit, and I'd ask you to remember that. If you feel that an issue has been discussed thoroughly and that there's nothing to be gained from further discussion, if the horse is dead, you can move to call the question. That motion is to be made by someone who has not just made a speech. It's a separate individual motion. If you make that motion, we'll take it. It's a privileged motion. Requires a 2/3 vote. There's no debate on it, and that would close debate, and we would move to a vote on the question. I call votes based on the voices that I hear. Sometimes, if it's very close, I'll have to ask people to stand or to show their cards. Only to do a counted vote takes quite a while. So I'd ask if we can be clear when we do a voice vote and see if we can resolve most of those, and that saves quite a bit of time in terms of the operation. Under our town bylaw, I can declare a 2/3 vote based upon the voice vote that I hear. But if someone questions my call, and sometimes what I hear up here is different from what you may hear on the floor, and if you think that it wasn't 2/3, 7 people can rise and ask that there actually be a counted vote, in which case we will do the counted vote and move through it like that. Again, the acoustics in this room are not the greatest. If you have difficulty hearing, let us know. Our sound people work very hard to try and keep all of this operating, and if you have difficulty hearing, let us know, and we'll see. It may mean you just have to move to a better spot, but there are dead spots here, and we want to make sure everyone can hear and participate. Lastly, please silence your cell phones. Do as I say, not as I do. Do as I do, not as I say. And I think with that, we're ready to go. The first order of business is is a consent agenda, which we've worked with now for the last 4 or 5 town meetings. Under the consent agenda, we group a number of items which are rather routine and a part of the housekeeping that is done, particularly at a special town meeting, as we balance the budget, rebalance accounts, etc. However, if someone has an interest in a particular item, they can have it removed from the consent agenda just by asking, calling out, hold, and we'll remove it from the consent agenda and deal with it separately in the order that it comes. I will now read through the articles and the subjects which we're proposing to have in the consent agenda. If anybody feels that they want to address a particular article and they don't want it part of the consent agenda, they should just loudly say hold. We'll remove it from the agenda. If an item is not held, it will be grouped with the others. We'll take one vote, and that will cover all of those articles and all the recommendations that have been made and the motions that have been made as they appear in the consent agenda, which is an appendix in the advisory committee report. So as we do that, I will go through the proposed issues for the consent agenda. The first is Article 2, which is unpaid bills from a prior fiscal year. Next, Article 3, which is the budget balancing and reconciliation transfers, appropriations. Next is Article 4, which is reserve fund transfers. Next is Article 10, amendment of the general bylaws to include an account in the Council for Aging. Next item for the consent agenda is Article 11, which is a acceptance of a statute which allows the town to have a OPEB, post-employment benefit trust, and to invest those funds through the state retirement system. And last, we have Article 12, which is an acceptance of an easement at 27 Brook Street. You'll note that if you look at the consent agenda, there was an Article 13. That has already been, someone has already asked that that be dealt with separately. And we'll get through Article 13 in order as we get to that, as we go along. Okay, having heard no one wanting to pull any of the items, any of the articles that are within the consent agenda, I'm going to ask first for the recommendation of the advisory committee as set forth in their book on, well, first I want a motion. I'm sorry. First, let's get a motion from the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to take Articles number 2, 3, 4, 10, 11, and 12 out of order, and that they be passed as by consent in accordance with the motion shown on the consent agenda distributed this evening.
Thank you. Second. Have a second. Now, Mr. Vignani, we want to...
I'll just add that the Select Board voted unanimously 5-0 in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Mr. Gilmore for the advisory committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Your advisory committee unanimously accepts this consent agreement.
Thank you. So the motion before you is to accept the affirmative motions that have been made under the articles that we have listed. All those in favor, this is going to require a unanimous vote for bills of prior years at a special town meeting. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Great. I declare that a unanimous vote, and those articles are passed as per the motions in the advisory committee booklet. We move now to Article 1, which is the siting of a water treatment plant. Mr. Goodrich.
I move that the town, in accordance with Article 5 of the April 11th, 2022 special town meeting, authorize the Select Board, Department of Public Works, Water Division, and their respective agents to site the new water treatment plant at 443, 461 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, and identified by the Town of Scituate Assessor's Office as parcels 47-2-26A through 47-2-26J, also known as Stearns Meadow.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second. We have a second. Any discussion? Take a recommendation from the advisory committee. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tonight we're considering Article 1, which is the siting of a new water treatment plant. As Mr. Goodrich said, we already approved at our April meeting the need for a new water treatment plant. This is about the location. The location that's being proposed is the Stearns Meadow land out on Route 3A. Alternative sites were considered, but deemed to be unacceptable. There were 3 community outreach meetings so that we could discuss any objections, and the Select Board had a presentation on August 23rd that I attended, and there were no dissenting comments from any members of the community. As a result of this, the advisory committee voted in favor of Article 1 by a vote of 5-1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. We have further discussion. Mr. Goodrich?
The town administrator and I will actually both talk to this issue a bit, and we'll have a presentation up here for you. As we've said, today's purpose is just for the location of the treatment plant. If this passes, we'll be able to proceed and try to get a new plant, and actually get a new plant online by October 2026. But what happens if this vote fails? We should anticipate spending between $7 to $10 million on a Band-Aid to try to keep a water treatment plant that is not in state compliance together. You will see no water quality improvement. You will see service disruptions, and the state will start mandating fines on our town, knowing full well that there's no feasible alternative. I don't think I need to belabor our water issues, but again, our current system is out of compliance and we have no backup systems. The current water treatment plant cannot be retrofitted. And for the past 2 years, we've had to send out safety warnings to residents about the quality of our water. A no vote will ensure that this will be happening more and more. I also want to point out that just last month in August, due to residents contacting Mass DEP, they came out to inspect our site. And in the memo, it was clear that we are out of time. The state has taken notice. We need a permanent solution, and we need one now. This has not been a process that we've taken lightly. Now up there it says that we've started back in 2021. That's actually not true. It goes back further. In 2018, we had Ty and Bond have a study. Ty and Bond is an engineering firm to go back, and they were the first ones in 2019 to recommend a new treatment plant. Then in April of 2021, I stood up here, and unanimously the town passed the purchase of the Stearns Meadows site with the understanding that it might be a potential treatment site. We thought ahead. It was an alternative plan to be fiscally responsible. The funding was approved, and now here we are because it was amended for a separate approval for the location. Back in May of this past year, again, with an override vote of 70% approval for the funding of this site. And again, the article today is for the location. Since that time, there have been surveys of over 1,000 residents, neighborhood meetings, select board meetings, advisory committee meetings, water resource committee meetings. We've created a new website to advise people, a special email and a weekly update for people to come ask questions, lengthy phone calls and email exchanges. And if any resident that did ask, I personally visited any one of the 134 sites that anyone asked me to, a few with my dogs, true, to see how those sites would look. And when those asked, I went out to take a look for them. We even had an open house on the old plant to see what's been done. We've been listening, and we understand there's still more work to do. That, Jim.
So as Mr. Goodrich pointed out, after the town meeting last year, where we were directed to look at alternative sites, we did send our consultant back to look at every town-owned parcel of land in excess of 8 acres, which is the minimum size necessary to build a water treatment plant that we are looking at. We analyzed them based on 13 criteria, including 2 of the most important, which is optimal location near the water source and property ownership. We came back after doing all those. I apologize if this map is not very good. We put this on our website. You can look at every single site we looked at, click on it, and get the parameters of that site, the pros and cons of that site, and why or why not it might be a good site for the water treatment plant. After all this work was done, we still come back to the site to build a water treatment plant is the Stearns Meadows site. For every mile that we move away from the water source, it will cost an extra $4 to $5 million in pipes and pumps and other ancillary equipment to get the water to that water treatment plant. In the process, this was our conceptual design. What this shows is based on our pilot study, what we need for treatment processes, will it fit on the site and still meet all required zoning and setbacks? This concept shows it did meet the requirements and fits on the Stearns Meadows site. However, based on this drawing, there were several concerns raised not only by the abutters but others. Why are there multiple buildings? Why is there not more buffer? What is the degree of land clearing? Why are the lagoons so big? So we went back, and based on the science, we were able to update that drawing. As you can see, we've gone from 2 buildings to 1 building. We've reduced the overall size of the plant by 20%. We continue to do our pilot program, science, and we've been able to reduce the size of the lagoons by 24%. We've increased the buffer to the neighbors by moving the site, as I keep saying, down and to the left, down and to the left, away from the residential neighborhood. You will see on this drawing that there are some circles with dotted lines. Those are wetlands. It is possible in the planning process that we might be able to replicate those wetlands someplace else on the property and continue moving that treatment plant down and to the left, down and to the left. If there's been one consistent directive from the Board of Selectmen to the staff and to the consultant, it is that the buffer between the neighbors and the plant should be maximized in all circumstances. So at this point, we have worked very hard to meet those concerns as expressed on our public forums, move it away, go from 2 buildings to 1, reduce the size of the building, increase the size of the buffer, and reduce the size of the lagoons. Through all our work, through everything we have done, we keep coming back that this is the optimal location, in most cases the only location, that we can build the treatment plant that Scituate needs for the water that we have going forward. At this point, I'm just going to let Mr. Goodrich finish up with the schedule.
So the schedule moving forward after tonight, there will be ample opportunity for more public comments. For MassDOT, Mass DEP, Zoning Board, Planning Board, Conservation, these are all opportunities for folks, for us to continue that movement and increase, if we can, that buffer zone. And again, the optimal time, October 2026, will be the completion of the site. I do want to thank the residents who did call and email, that came to some of those public meetings. One of the most interesting things and powerful things that I heard was the concern how this treatment plant could impact their family. And I get it. I get it. It's the only reason I'm standing here was how the old treatment plant impacted my family when I saw my 2-year-old drink a full glass of dirty brown water. The impacts that a treatment plant can have go beyond what we think of. We've had other residents talk about their appliances and clothing. The impact is real. But here's another impact. For those young families and folks who I do care deeply about, I never want them to go through what I went through. There's a positive impact to saying yes, and that's ensuring quality, clean water for generations that we deserve. We deserve the best treatment plant that we can. And the impact is going to be monumental for the future of this town. And I wanted to thank those residents for putting that into perspective as we move forward. And I ask you to please, please make the impact on this town so we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodrich. Further discussion from the floor. Lady to my right.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening. My name is Abigail Aronstam. I live at 142 Old Forge Road. And I found that in many scenarios in life that there are two things that can be true at the same time. And this situation in the new water treatment plant is no different. Oh, sorry, vertically challenged. The first truth, we need a new water treatment plant. Plain and simple. We need a new water treatment plant. The second truth is that green space in this town must be preserved. Over the past few years, we've seen precious green space diminish as condos and safety buildings and other structures have taken precedent. I speak now to my fellow residents of Scituate as someone who has read the emails and attended the meetings, watched the Facebook Live, which you say no abutter was present, but we were watching on Facebook Live on that August 23rd meeting. And to consider myself extremely engaged and aware, please listen to my continued concerns regarding Article 1. 1, the Stern Meadows site is not, as one select board member put it, ambiance for 3A in the homes of Stearns and Old Forge. This 17-acre plot is a habitat to a number of wildlife and a place for trees and vegetation. As an advocate of against climate change, I plead you to find a new location for the water treatment plant. I am concerned not only for our wonderful town, but for our world. This is not a time to be cutting down and eliminating precious flora from our region. It is a time to be protecting it. 2, something else that I think should be made very clear is that a no vote does not mean we don't get a new water treatment plant. A no vote tonight would ask that we go back and we look at those sites. We find a safer, more ecological site for our new water treatment plant. 3, the Select Board and Woodard and Curran's team will tell you that they have conferred with the abutters and they have listened to our concerns and have addressed them in their new plans. And yet, there's still concern over the size and placement of lagoons. There's still safety concerns about the curb cuts into 3A. They have not taken into consideration the removal of the administrative offices, perhaps moving them off-site. They have not taken into consideration asking a new engineer company to peer review their plans and perhaps make the existing site work. Finally, this isn't about ambiance and it's not about backyards. For me, and I hope for you, this is about what type of town do we want to be? Do we want to demolish green space by clear cutting and putting up condos or town buildings in every natural space available? Do we want to be a town that disregards what has already been built to throw careless costs to the wind and have new, when the record shows they can't maintain what already exists? Or do we want to be a town with lush and healthy that provides for our wildlife and is helping slow down the effects of climate change? While I'm pleased to see the number of CPC projects, we must do all that we can to protect this green space by providing habitats for our wildlife and encourage our town officials to dig a little deeper to find a placement for our new water treatment plant that provides a cost-effective and yet sustainable option for our town. I fear deeply not only for our beautiful coastal community, but for our global climate. Because if we don't take action now to protect our world, who will? I encourage and implore my fellow residents to please vote no on Article 1. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a lady at the mic on my left.
Hi, I'm Emily Simmer. I'm at 36 Sherman Drive, and I'm a member of the Water Resources Commission. I urge you all to vote yes to the new water treatment plant tonight, and not just because we desperately need it, although that is true. I ask you to vote yes because due diligence on this project has been done, and to delay it any longer would be irresponsible. The project has been appearing on public meeting agendas since 2019 after the release of the Water Master Plan that stressed the urgent need for a new plant. At that time, we had no reason to think that a different location would be necessary. But once we started pilot testing our actual water, we learned it required a more robust treatment process and a larger footprint than the plant's current site affords. We voted to purchase Stearns Meadow at a prior town meeting, and its potential as a site for a new water treatment plant was emphasized. Last spring, we approved the funding, but an amendment was added making that approval contingent on one more vote on the specific location, which is why we are here tonight. And since the vote last spring, the town has taken another look at available land to ensure they hadn't missed any other potentially workable sites. They've revised the preliminary design, which has been shown to us tonight, the upgrade, the changes that were made in response to the residents' concerns that were received at public meetings and through a townwide survey. Until we have an approved site, we can't move forward with the year-long process of securing approvals from town and state boards. And again, during this time, we will have more opportunities to comment as residents. Unfortunately, and not for lack of looking, we just do not have another site in this town where we can build the plant that we need to effectively treat the water that we have. We are 3 years into this process, and we cannot afford to wait any longer. We've asked the town to prioritize fixing our water. They have responded, but they can't do that without our support tonight. Please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman at the center microphone.
I've been hunting since I was about 16 years old.
Would you please identify yourself and where you live?
Oh, I'm sorry, Philip Oliver, 418 Country Way.
Thank you.
So I spent a lot of time in the woods, and you get a real appreciation for the environment. And I totally get the environmental arguments, but we've got people that have spent a lot of time investigating the other sites. They've come back to us and said they're just not compatible. What are you going to do? I would suggest, if you're concerned about the environment and all the trees that are being cut down, you focus your attention on new developments that we would like to have, but what's more important? More people in the town to use more water, or to have the water for the people that are already here? Yes, there will be an environmental impact. You gotta put it on the scale and say, what are you gonna do? And I don't think we have a choice. I'm suggesting we vote yes.
Thank you. Gentleman to my right, the red.
How you doing? My name is Steve Young, 5 Old Forge Road. I stood before you last time to talk a little bit about, what this piece of property means to the town. Asked a lot of questions. We're in those meetings, on those calls, and nobody from the town has done any study on why we should keep this property pristine. It fills up the reservoir. That's only a surface water reservoir. It's really not even a reservoir. We only call it a reservoir because we drink out of it. If anybody looked at that, they'd be like, oh, that's a nice pond. It's not meant to be something that we use and we get all our water from. Maybe we complement and augment our wells, right? I heard a lot about wells. Most of our water comes from wells. I don't know if you guys know that. They said 90% of our water comes from wells. Well, the wells are treated at the site. They go through sand filters, and they also add chemicals to it, and it goes directly into your pipes. Not everything goes through the water treatment plant. I didn't know that until I started doing the investigation on, what questions have been asked. Why should we maybe keep this land pristine, right? I haven't heard anything about that. They haven't talked about it. We've asked about it. Scituate kind of has a habit of doing things a little backwards sometimes. We all know what that is. I see the head shaking, right? We're doing it again, folks. Mr. Goodrich, he's a very eloquent speaker, but he says stuff that is not really that accurate. And what I mean by that is that not all the water goes through the water treatment plant, like I said, right? We're not going to run out of water in 1.5 days. You know, those are things to make you vote the way they need you to make you vote, right? If we spent the time, a little bit of time understanding what that land actually means to us, I think you'd be pretty surprised. You have Norwell, Cohasset, Hingham, all buying up land around their reservoirs. Why? Because they don't want to disrupt the actual water that's feeding the reservoir. Kind of makes sense. Kind of makes common sense. But what are we doing? We're doing it again. We're always in a rush. I've been here for 25 years. Every single time there's a rush. They give you barely enough information to make a decision the way they want you to go. I'm telling you, I'm in a butter. It's not a NIMBY issue, okay? It's not a NIMBY issue. So if somebody comes up here and says, oh, it's NIMBY, no, it's not. We talked to them about cutting down, you know, having no offices, just the raw water treatment plant. Nope. All the questions that were asked never got addressed. We did that to the folks that were for the windmill, right? We all had to have a windmill in town. You had 2 selectmen last time saying that the windmill was probably put in a bad spot. That affects people. This water treatment plant that we have, I don't think nobody's debating that we need a new one. You funded it for a new one. If you think it's going to cost you $50 million, it's not going to cost you $50 million. It's being slow rolled. It's going to cost you $75 million.
Sir, we're talking about the location.
I understand, sir.
Not the project. Let's keep it to the location.
Yeah, okay. So, when you look at the location, it doesn't make sense that you want to develop on the very piece of property that fills the reservoir. They want to use more water out of the reservoir, right? Well, how much are you going to use? We have 90% of our water comes from wells, like I said. Do you want to use 600,000 gallons, 800,000 gallons? Does anybody think that you can get that much water out of our reservoir that's currently going dry? You're going to have a water issue problem, volume problem later on. That reservoir is not meant to have 600,000 or 800,000 gallons taken out of it. Guaranteed in 10 years, if you pass this tonight, all you want to be able to do is just ask questions. Understand what these 40 people that made these decisions, what questions did they ask? What questions did they not ask? Be a little bit more transparent. Right? Understand how this is going to affect you, your kids' kids for generations. This thing is 70 years old as it is, or 60 years old. This is not just a throw money at it, and it's going to solve the problem. Everybody said to me, okay, and I've talked to a lot of people, oh, we have brown water because of the pipes. Well, okay, how is that a water treatment problem?
Sir,
I understand we need a new one.
Sir, the location, and you've got 30 seconds to wrap up.
I say vote no. Vote no. Ask for more information. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go away. You're asking for more information. You have the right to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman on my right is next.
Thank you. John Bullman, 72 Old Forge Road. I live on Old Forge Road. I'm not in a butter. I couldn't be further from this plant. I actually have one of the town pumping stations in my backyard as my direct butter. I agree with the need for the new treatment plant. It doesn't shock me at all that the proximity to the reservoir makes this the best site, so I accept the fact that the town's done its due diligence, and this is the best site for a water treatment plant. What it's not the best site for is the offices and the equipment and all the administrative functions that aren't necessary for the water treatment plant. As a matter of fact, they exist now over at the old Oak and Bucket plant, When that plant is gone, there'll be more space for those. I've been on the calls. I've asked questions that have not been addressed, despite the representations tonight. I've heard that we need new offices because they're old and they don't even have caller ID. I'm pretty sure we can buy a phone system for a lot less than $50 million. I've heard someone from the town that thought it was a great spot for a new ball field once we got rid of the new water treatment plant. I love baseball. I coached it. I played, you know, I coached with Tony, you know, but we don't need a ball field to go down, tear down an extra bunch of forest. So I agree with the Stearns Meadow site. I agree with it as a site for a water treatment plant. I don't agree with the excessive dollars we're going to spend on a right now we've allocated $50 million without a budget, and that design that they've shown us has all kinds of meeting rooms and administrative offices and parking for equipment that has nothing to do with running that plant. We can save dollars for the town if it's just a plant. We can save acres of forest that doesn't have to be deforested. We can give the abutters even more space, so those reductions of 20 and 24%, maybe they go to 50% if we leave the offices back at Old Oak and Bucket Road. And maybe we don't add traffic to the crest of a hill where you've got Doctors Hill on one side and Old Forge on the other side, and traffic that comes flying up and down the hill that you have no line of sight whatsoever. And you now adding the treatment plant and the few vehicles that have to go in and out with equipment and supplies is one thing. Adding all the workforce for all the water functions that services all the other wells and all the other distribution systems just creates a traffic nightmare. So it was my intent to propose an amendment to the article to limit it to just the treatment plant with no administrative functions, and I'm told the moderator thinks this is about the site, and that's out of order. He won't accept that amendment.
That's correct, Mr. Bowman.
And I disagree with you, Mr. Moderator. I think it's incredibly relevant and in order. We're voting about the site for a water treatment plant, not for administrative offices. There are plenty of other offices that are in Town Hall that have their... So I'd like an explanation of why it's out of order and why it isn't part of the relevance of this site.
I've looked at the prior vote. It is clear that what is before the meeting tonight is the location, not the design.
It's the location of a water treatment plant.
Not the scope of the project. I'm not going to argue with you, Mr. Bowman. The motion is not in order, and I will not accept it.
Okay. So then if they won't accept an amendment that says this is a site for a water treatment plant, which I'm in favor of, then I'd say vote no until they would limit it to a water treatment plant and leave the offices someplace else that's already paved and disturbed, and they can stay right there, they can expand there, and they can get their voice caller ID system. Thank you.
Vote no. Lady on my left.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sarah Brockman, 78 Man Hill Road. I think it's inarguable that we need a new water treatment plant. I don't think anyone here disagrees with that. I do think it can be argued that we need to clear-cut 15 some odd acres in order to get a water plant. We have to remember that this is not just pretty woods. This is an actual ecosystem. And once it's gone, it cannot be replaced. We have to understand that the displaced fauna in particular, once gone, has to go somewhere, which means that it could be the turkeys and the coyotes and the wolves in our backyards eating our chickens and small dogs. In the worst case, it can also mean the deer plastered to our grills when we hit them on 3A because they have nowhere else to run. I actually think that the gentleman who preceded me had a wonderful idea of very much limiting the amount of forest that we clear cut in order to make this happen. And I would urge the town, until we have an idea, to minimize as much as possible how much of this ecosystem we are going to destroy for our water system, that we put a hold on this and figure out a correct answer to this. I say vote no.
The gentleman to my left.
Mark McCormick, 261 Gannett Road. Further talk is going to change nobody's mind. I call the question.
I have a motion to end debate. Do I have a second? I have a second. motion is to end debate, which means there'll be no further discussion, and we'll go directly to a vote on the issue. This requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of calling the question say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. I'm going to ask those who say aye to stand. Thank you. Those opposed, please stand. I'm going to declare this a 2/3 vote. 7 people rise. We can have a count. Thank you. The question has been called. There is no further debate. The issue is the motion before you on the location of the water treatment plant. All those in favor of the motion before you say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. This requires a majority vote. I declare it has passed this by a majority. The motion carries. Okay, moving on in the warrant, our next article is Article 5, the Capital Improvement Plan. Do we have a motion on Article 5? Yeah, give it a minute.
We'll move on to Article 5 once we've settled down just a little bit. And I will make a plug that we do have important town business, not related to the water treatment plant, that if you are inclined, it would be great if you could stay to participate.
Yes, the lady at the center mic.
Ann Burbine, 10 Pennycrest Road. I hope people understand, as they bail for the back door, that this vote can be brought up again after 1 or 2 articles goes forward. So I strongly urge you that if you want to continue, stay. Another 20 minutes won't kill you. Please, stay. Thank you.
I think that was a point of information. All right, now we'll go forward with Article 5. I believe we have a motion on Article 5.
I move that the town appropriate the sum of $3,341,519 for the purposes of funding capital projects as listed in the warrant, and that to meet such appropriations, $581,519 shall be transferred from free cash to pay for costs of the ambulance and town share of the grant for the police safe boat. $250,000 shall be transferred from the water enterprise retained earnings to pay for the cost of emergency water treatment plant repairs, and the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow $2,510,000 in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Sections 7 and 8, or any other such enabling authority to pay for the cost of the additional funds for Cole Parkway Marina dock replacement and the Jenkins School roof, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto. That the Select Board is authorized to apply for grants, accept gifts or donations for the purposes of this vote from federal, state, or private sources on behalf of the town, and that the amount of the authorized borrowing shall be reduced by the amount of any grants, gifts, donations received prior to any such borrowing.
We have a motion. I have a second. Have a recommendation from Advisory Committee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Your advisory committee met with capital planning and thoroughly vetted all 5 of these items. We voted in favor of them all. We think that's money well spent. It will improve every aspect that each of these items deals with. So we hope it passes. Thank you.
Further discussion. A note for the meeting record that the Capital Planning Committee has reviewed these proposals and has voted to recommend them to the meeting. Any further discussion? I don't, this is whatever you want to do. Yes, sir.
Larry Howell, 36 Moreland Road. Wasn't the Jenkins School a fairly new school and it needs a new roof? Needs repair? What happened?
I think we can get you an answer for that question. Mr. Boudreau.
Fairly new is a relative term. The Jenkins School is now over 20 years old. The school roof is actually up for replacement next year on the capital plan. So this is actually to try to take advantage of a solar possibility to replace the roof a year early. But the roof is actually up on our capital plan to be replaced.
Gentleman to my left.
Scott Greenbaum, 40 Damon Road. I have a question about the whole Jenkins proposal. Are we going to go out first and get multiple proposals from multiple suppliers of PV's roof equipment before we sign a contract with the unsolicited bid?
Can we get an answer to that question? School Business Administrator.
Thank you for your question. The provider that was unsolicited also is from out of state. We did then explore working with another provider who participates in the Mass-sponsored Power Options Program, which is an already vetted provider through the state program. So we would not be going out to bid because they participate in that Power Options Program.
All right. As a professional who does this, there's a lot of information missing. I do this for a living. We don't know any idea how many kilowatts they're putting on these roofs. The price that they have offered is way above the going rate. We can buy this stuff a lot less expensively, and I would recommend that you go out and get it. Do you know how many kW they're putting on these two roofs?
All right, we're not going to have a back and forth question and answer. Your question is?
Do we know how much kW is being solicited, is being built in this from this proposal?
The question, I believe, is what kilowatts are encompassed in the project? I'm sorry?
The size of the array.
You're going to have to address the meeting, please.
I don't recall the size of the array for both roofs, because they're also proposing the high school for solar power. I know it's over 650,000 kW.
All right. Well, I find this to be a very unusual process of non-competitive bidding being used. I would recommend that we approve the money because supposedly it's going to be paid by the unsolicited bid, but I would recommend that we go through a normal bidding process, just like we did at the wastewater treatment plant, what we did with the windmill, and I believe we can greatly improve on the economics of this proposal by using normal procurement processes, and I'm actually surprised that this makes the procurement process. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the capital plan? Seeing nobody at the mics, it'd be time for a vote. This requires 2/3 vote for approval. All those in favor of the motion to approve the capital expenditures, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. I declare it a 2/3 vote. If 7 voters want to have a count, please rise now. No one rising, it's declared a 2/3 vote. We next move to Article 6, which is a community preservation article, approval of projects under community preservation. I'd ask for a motion. Ms. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I can't see with my glasses on, and I can't see with them off. I move that the town act on recommendations...
Want to get a little closer to the microphone, please?
Yeah. I move that the town act on recommendations from the Community Preservation Committee pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44B, the Act, to appropriate the sums of money as indicated in the printed warrant. Appropriations for the items below are to be expended first from any existing reserves for the purposes of such item, then appropriated from Community Preservation FY 2023 estimated revenues, with any excess to be appropriated from Community Preservation unreserved funds, unless otherwise specified below. All such sums appropriated are further to be expended, subject to all of the terms and conditions of the applications regarding such projects, filed with the CPC and the votes of the CPC regarding approval of such items. Number 1, 90-foot baseball field construction phase recreation, $993,520. 2, Cushing Trail restoration recreation, $150,000. Beach Commission, Moby Mats, Recreation, $13,052. Historic Preservation Study from Historic Resources, $60,000. Damon Access and Picnic Area Open Space, $105,700. Crosby and Bates Picnic Area Open Space, $107,500. Bailey Ellis House Windows, Tower and Door Restoration from Historic Funds, $89,526.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? The motion is seconded. We need a recommendation from both the Community Preservation Committee and the advisory. Let's hear from the advisory first.
Good evening. Lost my cards. Okay, there are 7 projects here, a total of approximately $1.5 million that have been recommended. About $1.4 million is in a sort of bucket of recreational open space, and the largest is the baseball field that Ms. Conley mentioned, natural grass field, and it was originally identified the need for this field with the high school field projects, but was excluded from that project, and it has now been determined that the best location is the central field. So it will be multi-use. It will be natural grass. Seems reasonable. Additional projects within this bucket are improvements to recreational areas. The other large area of expenditure is in the sort of historic area in which we have the Bailey Ellis House improvements, and additionally we have the proposed creation of a historic preservation plan for the multitude of artifacts and buildings and sites that we have in our town. So the advisory committee voted unanimously 8-0 to recommend these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. And the statute requires that we have a recommendation and vote from the Community Preservation Committee, the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to thank the Select Board and Advisory Committee for their reviews of the project and the applicants for submitting all the projects we had for approval. As an overview of the project, we vetted and approved 7 projects, and of those 7 projects, 5 are actually continuations of existing projects that have been going on for several years. Those projects include the beach mats at the beaches, the work to complete the Damon and Crosby Bates trails and picnic areas, the continuing renovation of the Bailey Ellis House, and the 30-foot and 90-foot baseball field design and installation, which was initially planned when the high school field renovation took place. This project will complete the field project and provide and improve an equitable environment for boys baseball and girls softball.
There have been some recent discussions regarding the irrigation at the baseball field, which I'd like to address up front. The project is replacing an existing field and creating a new softball infield in the south area of Central Field. There will be no additional burden on the town for continuing watering of the fields. Nothing's going to change to that in that aspect. What will be needed is a 3 to 4 week period of irrigation to let the sod grow, which requires about a 1/4 inch of water in the areas that the sod is put in per day. The worst estimate for use of water is about 150,000 gallons per week. Again, beyond the initial sod growth, there will be no burden on the water resources in town. In fact, the proposed irrigation system will incorporate newer technologies to improve the water if the systems ever get turned back on. 2 new projects include the restoration of the pathway between Cushing School and the high school and a historic study to allow for more informed decisions regarding the use of several hundred historic resources in town. Again, I'd like to thank the applicants of these projects, who are all volunteers, for submitting these projects to the committee, participating in the vetting process in order to ask for your approval tonight. The Community Preservation Committee voted unanimously on all 7 of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Having all the necessary recommendations, is there discussion on the proposals from the Community Preservation Committee? Lady at the center microphone.
Good evening. Patricia Lambert, 14 Alexander Place. I'm speaking as a private citizen, not as the chair of the planning board. Could you tell us a little more about the irrigation? We were told it's 200,000 gallons a day for approximately 12 to 16 weeks, 3 times a week. That's about 1 million gallons of water. We don't have any water. So if you don't turn the system on, how do you plan to keep this field green?
Yeah, I'm not sure where you got that information, but speaking with Mark Novak, who is, and he was, I think, shooting from the hip when he mentioned that at the meeting that you were in. What he's come back with is about 150,000 gallons a day, a 1/4 inch of water, and that's the worst case scenario, and that's for a 3 or 4 week period. So it's not the amount that he originally said. And also consider, this isn't watering the entire field. This is watering just the areas where there will be sod, which will be the infield of the 90-foot baseball field and some of the areas around the infield. So the rest of the outfield and the soccer fields that are there and the north side of Central Field will not need any irrigation because they're not doing any work on the grass there.
So if you wonder why people are confused when we talk about these projects, that is not what we were told. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman to my left? No? Okay. Gentleman to my right, red shirt.
How you doing? Steve Young, 5 Old Forge Road. So we're sitting here talking about a water treatment plant, but now...
Could you speak in the microphone, please?
Sure. Can you hear me now? So we're sitting here talking about a water treatment plant, and we're going to use more water on the ball field. Doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Gentleman on my left.
Darren Campbell, 57 Acorn Street. I'm actually the CPC applicant for this project and former president of Little League, current vice president. The need for the field has been well established, and if we want the field to have grass, we need to irrigate it while the sod takes hold. And as Mr. Fenley explained, the prior estimates were made, I think, in Mark Novak's head on the spot, and he overestimated given the actual amount of disturbed area, not taking into account the skinned infield surface, the sideline areas, and I think, again, to clarify, it's 150,000 gallons a week. I think you said a day by accident, but per week, while the sod takes. And that's all it requires. Again, on a go-forward basis, it's a as needed, which we haven't needed to irrigate that field in some time. So it comes down to, do we want our kids to be able to recreate on a field that is grass and safe, or do we want them to have something like what we have over at Cushing when we didn't irrigate? So we need the sod to take if we want a field, and it takes water. So it's just, once again, thank you.
Thank you. Lady in the center mic.
Good evening. My name is Martha Cook. I'm from 3 Acorn Street in Scituate. I believe you asked us to disclose if we have any affiliations.
Could you speak in the microphone again?
I'm a former member of the Water Resources Commission. I previously asked a lot of questions about this field, and I was satisfied that the irrigation would be similar to what we're already using on that field. Otherwise, I would have been objecting significantly that we are not going to use, as the former speaker said, more finished drinking water on grass. However, you could go a long way toward helping me feel better about this if you could explain to us the time frame of your construction plans. This gentleman mentioned that the Cushing School field, unfortunately, was installed during the height of one of the hottest summers, and water had to be trucked in. Perhaps could you assure us that you're going to time this so that the sod is put in the spring or the fall, when it's the most ideal time to start a new grass area, so that we can rely on Mother Nature as opposed to our irrigation? That would make me personally feel a lot better. Thank you.
Is there a response to that question? Mr. Fennelly?
So if the funds are passed for the project and it's finally approved, the anticipation is work will start in the fall and continue into the spring, so it can be ready for 2023.
Thank you. Gentleman in the green to my right.
Hello, thank you. Mike Connor. I'm on the Rec Commission, but I'm speaking as a private citizen from 11 Linden Ave. This project's been in the works for a long time, years, actually, to be fact. And quite frankly, there's a need for it in town, no question about it. I know this gentleman back here said it's not necessary, and but it is. There's been a lot of work put into this. You've had soccer is getting an improved field. Softball, girls softball, and senior softball is getting a new field. And baseball, who lost a field with the construction of our beautiful complex up at the high school, lost a field. And they've dealt with that for the last couple of years. So there's been less time for playing time. So, in this day and age, we say we want our kids to be out, to be active, not playing Fortnite or not playing Xbox. Well, this is going to add to that. So I think there's no question as far as the town goes. Now, is there a sacrifice for a couple of weeks for water? Yes, there may be. But what you have is you're going to have exponentially a much better field for multiple sports and actually multiple generations. So it's a no-brainer. So thank you.
Thank you. Lady on my right.
Laura Dwyer, 11 Pinebrook Lane. I'm a mom of a softball player who graduated in 2019 and dealt with the Title X. But my concern is totally watering any type of grass sod at this point in Scituate's history, because some people don't even have clean drinking water, that we're going to put a field before clean drinking water. So that's my concern, and I would encourage you to vote no just on that article, just on that portion of it, the baseball field, until we can address this at a more appropriate time.
Further discussion. I understand we didn't actually get a statement in terms of the Board of Selectmen's position on this. I know we had a motion, but I don't think we knew what the vote was.
I neglected to say that the Select Board voted in favor of all of community preservation articles. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. All right, we're going to vote on all of these items. It requires a majority vote. if we have to break something out, we'll do that. But let's try them as a group to begin with. All those in favor of the motion as presented by the Board of Selectmen approving these projects, say aye. Aye. Opposed? I declare it a unanimous vote, and passed. We move now to Article 7, which is a zoning article. I'd ask for a motion. Mr. Vignani.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town amend Section 750, Design Review for Business, Commercial, Mixed Use, and Multifamily Development by deleting the existing Figure 6, building setback, step back, and street enclosure in Section 705.5A, and replacing it with the new Figure 6, to clarify the building height as shown in the document in the file with the town clerk's office and available at scituatemass.com, scituatema.com.
We have a motion. Second. Have a second to the motion. First, we'll get a recommendation from the advisory committee, and then we'll get back to you. Mr. McGuigan.
Thank you. Article 7 is put forth by the Planning Board. It truly just seeks to amend the graphics in the existing bylaw to more appropriately reflect its intent. In its current state, it has caused some ambiguity, and the examples drawn do not accurately reflect the article's intent. There's no change to the bylaw's content, and this is purely to improve communication. So the advisory committee recommends approval of this article by a unanimous vote.
Thank you. This is a zoning article. It requires a vote by the planning board. I'd ask Ms. Lambert, chairman of the planning board, to report on their hearing.
Good evening again. This is a housekeeping article. The graphs in the language in the zoning bylaw do not align. It is our intent to remedy that. This particular portion of the bylaw refers to what is known as a setback, step back. These height requirements in relationship to setbacks were passed to avoid what is known as a canyon effect, which produces, as we know, unattractive and out-of-scale buildings. The planning board has had several projects come before us where the graph and the language have been fused together, and we want to straighten that out. So Section 750 of the zoning bylaw outlines the design review process for business, commercial, mixed use, and multifamily development in the town. Now, subsection 5A3 of the zoning bylaw provides a figure known as Figure 6, which incorrectly depicts that a 45-foot tall building is allowed at the 50-foot setback line, and that is incorrect. The maximum building height and the number of stories allowed in the town of Scituate is 4 stories or 40 feet tall, as outlined. Section 750.5.8.2, a minimum and maximum height. The planning board is seeking to correct that Figure 6 to coincide with the maximum height allowable of 40 feet.
And there was a vote by the planning board after a hearing to support this. I may have missed that, but we want that in the record.
It is unanimous, yes.
It was. Thank you. Further discussion. Mr. Vignani?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Basically, the picture in the bylaw doesn't match what, or it's not that it doesn't match, but it doesn't really show the true picture of the way the bylaw is supposed to read, so they're changing the diagram in the bylaw. The Select Board voted 5-0 unanimous of this motion.
Further discussion? No one at the mics? Is everybody in favor of a new Figure 6? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. It's a unanimous vote. Move now to Article 8. There's another amendment to the zoning bylaw. Mr. Vignani.
Thank you again. I move that the town amend Section 750 design review and business commercial mixed use and multifamily development in the following manner. Delete section 750.5A 2.c, penthouse in its entirety, renumbering existing section D, building higher exceptions to C and E, ground floor elevation, and D. And also delete section 75.6B, special dwelling unit types in its entirety, which is penthouses, as shown in the documents on file in Town Clerk's office and available on situatema.gov.
Yeah, the motion is second. Second to the motion. Have a recommendation from the Advisory Committee. Mr. McGuigan.
Article 8, also put forth by the Planning Board, seeks to eliminate penthouses from new building structures as they often exceed the height limits seen from the sidewalk, which should not be the case. The Advisory Committee recommends the approval of this article and a unanimous vote in support, 6-0.
Thank you. For the Planning Board, Ms. Lambert.
So Article 8, Section 750.5.A2.c of the zoning bylaw indicates, quote, height limits do not apply to penthouse dwelling units as long as they are not visible from any sidewalk on the perimeter of the property line and meet the design standards of Section 750.6. The Planning Board has recently been presented with 2 different developments seeking to build penthouses to maximize their development and overdevelop the property. In both instances, the board felt that the penthouses would be visible from the perimeter sidewalks and thus feel penthouses do not fit in with the character of Scituate. It will make buildings unnecessarily taller and wishes to remove them from the bylaw. And the Planning Board supports this unanimously.
Further discussion on the removal of penthouses. Mr. Vignani?
Thank you again. Basically, this bylaw is, there's a bylaw right now that says that you can put a penthouse on top of a building and it exceeds the height requirement that you can build in town. And what the Planning Board has found is that people are taking advantage of that and they're putting penthouses on that don't meet the requirements of not being able to see it by the street. So they are removing that completely and saying that you can only go by the height restrictions that are in the planning or then in the zoning bylaws right now. The Select Board voted 5-0 and unanimously in favor of this motion.
Any further discussion? No one is at the mics. This vote would require a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of the amendment as proposed, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. It's a unanimous vote. The amendment is passed. Next, we have a proposal to amend our charter. Ms. Canfield.
I know that's why you're all here. I move that the town vote to approve the changes to the town charter set forth in the Advisory Committee report and authorize the Select Board to petition the General Court of the Commonwealth to enact special legislation authorizing such changes.
Have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion is seconded. We have a recommendation from the Advisory Committee. Mr. Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm sure Ms. Canfield and I know Michael have a presentation with some of the details. I won't repeat what's in the booklet. I will say that the Charter Review Committee did spend 2 years looking at the charter and working to make explicit changes that we, the members of the committee, thought would be improvements. I imagine some of the discussion this evening that may come up is a discussion of whether or not representative town meeting or some other form of government would be appropriate for the town, and further how some elected officials in town are elected, the process through which that happens. And I just want to make that clear ahead of time that that was not within the charge. Both of those were not within the charge as set forth by the Board of Selectmen to review, but rather the other items in the charter that were reviewed by the Charter Review Committee. And would point out that if in the future, if someone did want to examine some of those issues, an elected charter review commission would be the appropriate avenue for that. So, thank you.
Thank you. More discussion. Ms. Canfield.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Heineman has outlined what we couldn't do. I just want to take a moment to let you guys know that the committee it did work for over 2 years, and it included representation from the Select Board, the Advisory Board, School Committee, the Planning Board, and we had 4 residents that stuck with us for all this time to go line by line through the document before you. So I want to thank you. The chair of the Charter Review Committee is Mr. Michael Gibson. He is right there, and he will walk through very short slide presentations just to highlight what has changed and what has not changed so that you can understand what the proposals are.
Thank you. Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. There we go. I'd just like to take a brief minute to thank the members of the Charter Review Committee who spent 2 years going through and doing this. Ms. Karen Canfield from the Select Board, Ms. Nicole Brandolini from the School Committee, Mr. Lincoln Heineman from the Advisory Committee, Ms. Rebecca Lewis from the Planning Board, and then the other community members along with myself, Ms. Marla Minier, Mr. Andreas Vitor, and Mr. Raymond Volker. So this was a lengthy process, about 2 years, and during that time, the committee went through an in-depth, section-by-section review of the charter. During that time, they consulted with subject matter experts, town officials, relevant departments, and reviewed similarly situated town charters to see if we could take some best practices from those and bring them into our charter. After that time, there were several public forums, which we sought community input, synthesized all that information, and in June of this past year, the committee pulled together the red line you see before you tonight and approved its final recommendations in preparation for special town meeting. In July, the Select Board reviewed those and unanimously voted to approve and recommend the proposed revisions, followed by the Advisory Committee in August, also unanimously voting to accept and approve, or recommend, excuse me, the proposed revisions. So a quick little framing slide, which we've already talked about, but things that didn't change, you won't see them in here. Hopefully we can head off some discussion tonight. These were outside the scope of the committee. The scope was limited by the Select Board, so there were certain things that while we could talk about, couldn't recommend those changes, so you won't see them tonight. And it's changes to how elected officials were elected and town governance. However, the committee does plan to recommend to the Select Board that it authorizes a Charter Review Commission, which is a group of elected officials that can go through, study those things, and then perhaps present recommendations at a later time. There's also several instances where we did not propose specific timetables or processes and thought that those would better be in the bylaws. The reasoning there is to remain flexible. I don't know how many of you know, but it's rather complicated to change a charter. Had this committee, it has to be reviewed by relevant boards and committees, come before town meeting, as we're here tonight, goes to the state legislature for approval under home rule, and then has to be certified by the Attorney General. However, with bylaws, simple vote at town meeting can change those. Now, what did change? The fun stuff. Most of the changes you'll see are general and technical in nature. For example, all references to selectmen and board of selectmen have been changed to select board member or select board. Also removed other pronouns were not appropriate. Removed sections in the charter that are no longer applicable to the town. Revised language for clarity and consistency and added defined terms throughout. Really, the entire genesis of these changes was to make it a more approachable document so that everyone could fully understand what was in there and how our towns run. I know that the red line you see in tonight's advisory booklet's a little clunky, and that's because the charter we were working off is from 2003. No one in the town had a Word document copy of it, so we had to take a PDF, convert it over. There was a lot of weird formatting and spacing issues, so I promise if this is approved tonight, the clean version will read as one. You won't have all those strange breaks. Now, some of the specific changes I'd like to run through you briefly are added select board responsibilities to require that the select board review its policies on a rolling 3-year basis. The town administrator will help oversee this process and keep them honest. Require that the Select Board perform a town administrator performance review and release a summary of that to the public. We revised language in the Housing Authority section to comply with a change in law that was provided by Town Council, who reviewed it. Clarified that the town administrator need not be a town resident. We want to continue to attract the best talent to our town to be the town administrator, whether or not they live here. Added town administrator hiring and removal procedures. Hiring is for transparency, so that everyone knows how that process is conducted and who those relevant candidates are. And removal is rather obvious. If there's an issue, this is the procedure for firing. It's very explicitly laid out. Clarified the responsibility for maintenance of public buildings, facilities, and schools. Ultimately, this is done by the town administrator and the departments under that office. However, it's via the supervision and direction of the Select Board. But with respect to schools, those will consult with the school committee. Revised operating budget schedules to provide adequate time for review by the relevant boards and committees, including a school committee review of the school operating budget. And then there were several changes as it relates to the capital planning committee. The first is that the town administrator and the school committee appointee will be removed as voting members. So going forward, there'll be 5 residents that are appointed by the moderator, which is currently the process. And then the town administrator, the school committee appointee, the advisory committee appointee, and the select board member will be non-voting observers who are there to provide context and relevant advice, but they won't be able to vote. It will just be those 5 residents that are appointed by the moderator. Additionally, we revised the capital planning schedule to allow more time for input from the capital planning committee. So the capital improvement program is put together by the town administrator, who then brings that forth and proposes it to the capital planning committee and the select board 5 months prior to annual town meeting. Capital planning committee will then review and provide its recommendations to the select board 3 months prior to annual town meeting. And the select board will then provide the final capital improvement plan to advisory 60 days before annual town meeting. Last thing I want to touch on this evening is that the committee recommends removing limitations on elected official recall. In the 2003 version of the charter, there was a prohibition on any recall of an elected official until 3 months after an election. So thank you for your time tonight. Hopefully we could clarify any questions you might have, and appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks to the commission for all the hard work that went into this. Do we have any further discussion? Dr. Price.
In Carlton, 48 Seaview Avenue. I move that the town vote to approve the amendments to Article 9 as written in the handout provided to residents this evening.
We have a motion to amend in accordance with the handout. I mentioned, referenced the handout earlier. Do we have a second for that motion? Have a second? Okay. Do we have a recommendation? Has the advisory committee had a chance to look at this? If they have, we'd like to hear from them.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The advisory committee did have a chance to review this proposed amendment this evening and did vote 7-1 to not recommend it. The reasoning was nothing to do with the substance, but rather the thinking being that it was a relatively late date to bring some of these items and that the meeting might not have a full appreciation for making those changes in the context of seeing those on the night of town meeting.
Thank you. Okay, I would ask, could we just get a brief description of what these changes are? I know they're in the documents, but if we could if you could just tell us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I read the draft charter review first as chairman of the library trustees, just to see if there was any language in there that would affect library governance. I didn't find anything concerning. But second, I read it as somebody with many, many years' experience as an editor, writer, adjunct faculty member teaching communications courses, where my nickname was Attila the Editor. I did find, and I submitted to Karen Canfield, several dozen typographical changes, making consistencies in uppercasing, punctuation, that sort of thing. I also recommended a few points that would codify existing practices or add some clarity. For example, the First Amendment talks about the how the trustees are elected. It doesn't change it, but in the charter, it goes into some great length that the selectmen run for a particular position. School committee runs for a particular position. But when you come to the trustees, it just says 2 trustees are elected. Is that an oversight or not? The language here would clarify that the 2 top vote getters are elected. Requiring elected board input on department head hires, I have no concern that our current town administrator would do so, or even the prior town administrator. But if for whatever reason there should be some ill will or bad blood, I want to make sure that the boards with expertise are consulted to provide input. It does not change the authority of the town administrator as the person who ultimately makes a decision. That essentially is the kind of change. As I say, it codifies existing good practices.
Further discussion? I'll get that in a minute. Gentleman on my left.
Scott Greenbaum, 40 Damon Road. Make a motion to definitely postpone this article. I don't have a copy of what has been handed out. I don't know how many people in the audience does. I don't see the rush for this to making these changes. We can do this at the regular town meeting, and I can't make any decision on what this gentleman is asking for without a copy and knowing what he is recommending. Yeah, but I can't read it now and make a vote in 10 seconds. You know, we need to have adequate time to review something like this. And all I'm asking is that we indefinitely suspend this.
Okay, a motion to indefinitely postpone isn't in order. I think what you're saying is you oppose amending the main motion. That's what you're saying. So we understand your position and we understand the rationale for it.
No, I'm not. Oh, so I should be waiting until the main motion comes back, because I'm not opposing this because I don't know what it is.
I understand that. You're opposing that the amendment be added to the vote, and that's good.
No, I'm opposing that we vote on the entire thing because I don't know what his amendment is, and so therefore I don't, if it's been to a lot of people.
So you're proposing indefinite
postponement
of the whole charter thing. All right, that's not appropriate at the moment. We're talking about the amendment. Let's talk about the amendment. Any further comments on whether the amendment should be added? Board of Selectmen, I think, has a position on this. Mr. Vignani.
Thank you. Just want to tell you what our opinion was. So first of all, just to clarify, this is an amendment. We just went over the whole changes to the charter, and this is a request to make additional changes. And as the advisory committee mentioned, we just got this recently, and we haven't really met on it, and the select board agreed with the advisory committee that although the substance of the amendment we agree with, but we haven't discussed it in a proper forum yet. So we voted 4-1 not in favor of making the second amendment, but we do vote in favor of the initial charter and the changes that he read initially, if that's clear.
Okay. Further discussion on whether the amendment should be accepted. I assume the people standing are on the main motion and not on the amendment. Okay, so what we have before us now for a vote is whether you want to accept the proposed amendment entitled Proposed Amendments to Charter Revision Article September 19th, 2022 as set forth in this document. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed? The amendment is voted down. We'll go back to the main motion. Gentleman in center mic.
Gordon Price, 48 Manlot Road. On Section 5, which is the public building maintenance section, I have a question. It reads, the responsibility of the maintenance and repair of all town-owned buildings and grounds shall be consolidated under the Select Board, who shall oversee after all town buildings as set forth in Section 4-2, after consultation with the school committee where appropriate, blah, blah, blah. My question through you, Mr. Moderator, is that are we changing the funding mechanism for repairs to school buildings? Will those funds be under the school budget for repair, or are they still going to be under the town budget?
Can we get an answer from the Charter Review Committee on the effect of that change?
Sure, so it doesn't change funding. It just has to do with maintenance that the town administrator, if they're going to do anything, needs to consult with the school committee as an elected board that oversees the schools. So funding would go on the same as currently exists.
So the school funding will be under the school budget for repairs? Is that what you said?
Well, do you mean day-to-day maintenance, or you're talking about capital issues?
Basically capital maintenance.
Capital would still go before capital, which would be outside of that. It has to be approved via or
Could you speak up?
recommended.
I can't hear you.
If it's a capital issue, it has to go before, and it relates to the school, would have to go before the select board, the school committee, the capital planning committee would also make a recommendation, and then it would come here for a vote in the evening for a town meeting. So this really relates to ongoing day-to-day maintenance.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Gentleman at the center mic.
John Whitaker, 594 Country Way. I will make the motion for indefinite postponement of this article. I was going to speak after that gentleman did. Do we have a second? A second? I am a member of the Capital Budget Committee, have been for the better part of a decade, and I did submit input on the changes for our committee, got no response back from anyone. No one met with the Capital Budget Committee as a group to discuss the proposed changes. And I was going to say, well, okay, the wisdom of the group, I'll just be quiet. Now I'm hearing other people from other areas affected by this uneasy, lacking information, lacking discussion, not quite sure. In my case, I saw very valuable participation by the last two town administrators as voting members. Very useful, very much. Very valuable participation by representatives of the school committee. I particularly commend Peter Gates for excellent participation as a voting member. And I cannot see any rational reason for removing these two people as voting members. Not individuals, but those positions. The former town administrator gave useful input. But what bothers me is the lack of discussion with my committee. It's not that big a deal. We don't appropriate money. We don't hire people. There was talk about, well, double dip. The town administrator recommends why shave a vote. My argument would be, why not? We advise, for better or worse, as a group, hopefully as people with experience in capital, construction, and so forth. We give you advice. That's all we do. So why not simply leave the administrator and the school committee rep as a voting member? But better yet, let's have a thorough discussion with the people on the Capital Budget Committee about whether it's a good idea or whether it's not. I mean, I just met the chairman of the Bylaw Review Committee a couple of weeks ago as he joined our committee. I hadn't met the gentleman before that. So I'm saying, let's let this go to the annual town meeting and have a better, more thorough presentation on this article. It doesn't have to happen tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We next have, I think we have a motion coming. Yes, sir, on the left.
Scott Greenbaum, 40 Damon Road, in support of the indefinite postponement. There usually in past town...
Hold on. Are you making a motion to indefinitely postpone?
We didn't have a vote on this, on his motion.
We voted we voted down a motion to amend. We're now back to the main motion. Is it your desire to ask the meeting to indefinitely postpone this article?
I thought the last gentleman asked for that, and I seconded.
Okay,
so we're on that.
Okay, we have a motion to indefinitely postpone. We have a second to that. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. Go to a microphone, please.
Mr. Moderator, what's before town meeting right now is the motion for an indefinite postponement. Town meeting needs to vote that up or down and then go back to the main motion to accept or reject Article 9.
Well, they don't go back if they vote to indefinitely postpone. So
exactly. You're
all right. We're all on the same page here. We have before us a motion to indefinitely postpone. The effect of that is to take this off the table for tonight and have it come back another time. That's a debatable motion. So we'll hear from the proponent first on the rationale for the motion.
All right, Scott Greenbaum, 40 Damon Road again. So we had a proposal for amendment to this motion.
We don't have that. Forget the amendment.
No.
The amendment's gone.
It was normally in a town meeting when an amendment is proposed, the entire amendment is read. This was handed out, not to all the members.
Mr. Green, we do not have anything to do with amending this before us. We have the motion as presented and whether it's going to be indefinitely postponed. Stick with that, please.
That's what I'm sticking to. Since we couldn't vote on that because we don't know what's in it, therefore, to vote on this, we don't know how that would affect it, and we don't know if that information can come back to us. And there is no rush. This can be done at a normal town meeting, which I think the last time we did this type of work, it was at a normal town meeting, and where there will be more people that will understand what was changed. That's my supporting arguments. We should have an ability to know everything that was done, and the changes were not, we couldn't vote on them because they weren't read, and that would be normal procedure. And so we're out of normal procedure right now, and once you do that, we should indefinitely postpone it, and we have always indefinitely postponed things that are not clear in the past. That's my statement.
Okay. We have a motion to indefinitely postpone. We'll hear from the Charter Review Committee. Mr. Gibson.
So this wasn't a rush process. It's been going on for 2 years. The Charter Review Committee met probably 20 times to go over this. Mr. Whitaker, we did meet with the Capital Planning Committee several times. Chris Karchi was also consulted as well outside of it. We had a school committee member who was part of this committee who's well aware of the changes that were proposed. This has been going on for quite some time, as you can see here. There were several instances where we sought input from residents in public forums, and then the full scope of changes, not the amendments, that's outside of what we're talking about now. We're just talking about the changes that I went through this evening. This has been available online on the town website for months, and it's been out in the advisory booklet since it was printed. So this has been out there for a long time. It was certainly not done haphazardly, and the relevant chairs and committees that are affected, we've discussed it with them. I will say, as it relates to capital removing those appointees, the town administrator is the one who creates the capital improvement plan. To give that individual another vote at the meeting would be rather silly. They essentially would just always vote yes. So now you have 5 individuals who are outside of preparing that to independently review it. The same thing goes with the school committee representative. The school committee comes before the town administrator to present what they think should be in the capital improvement plan. they would have no incentive to vote against their own interests. So again, they're taken outside of it. No one says they can't go to those committee meetings to be able to provide input. They're just taken away from voting. That's the only thing. All of these are subject to open meeting law anyway, so no one is precluded from going to any of these meetings. Thank you.
All right, gentleman on my right.
Rick Murray, 16 Collier Road. My name is not Ann Burbine, but I move the question.
All right, we have a motion to move the question. Question before you is whether to take a vote and limit debate on the motion to postpone. All those in favor of limiting debate, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. I declare it a 2/3 vote. If 7 voters challenge that, we'll have a counted vote. No one has risen. That's a 2/3 vote. We will now proceed to the vote on the motion to indefinitely postpone. The effect of a yes vote on this would be to take this off the table and have it come back at another time. If you vote no, we would continue to discuss this and have a vote on the merits. All those in favor of indefinitely postponing the article, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. It's a majority vote is required. Obviously, there was not a majority vote. We'll continue with debate on the motion, which is to approve the revisions to the charter as proposed by the Charter Review Committee. Further discussion. Gentleman on my left.
Taft, 74 Brook Street. I would like to propose in section 710 recall petitions, a change to the number of signatories needed to have a recall. So this is on page 71. Currently says 15% of the voters of the town are required to sign the petition for a recall. This number is extremely high. Generally speaking...
Whoa. What is your motion?
So, okay, my motion is to change this number from 15% to 5% of the voters of the town.
All right. Do we have a second for that motion? We have a second for the motion. So the motion to amend would be to change the number of petitioners requesting a recall from what to what?
15% to 5%.
All right. That's the proposed amendment. Now we'll hear your discussion on the proposed amendment.
Thank you. The reason for the proposed amendment is, generally speaking, the town positions that come before vote, the number of people that show up is only about 15%. In a good vote, it's 20% of the town voters. So to require the number of signatories needed to have a recall is to almost call another vote for the person you're trying to recall. So the standard here is incredibly high to recall somebody. Recently, about, I don't know, a year ago, the school committee had an individual who engaged in some activity that wasn't good. And to their credit, the school committee got with that individual and that person resigned. But had it required a recall, it would have almost required another entire vote, or the number of people to sign a petition to recall this person who had engaged in this really bad conduct. And so what I'm trying to say is this number, 15%, is so high as to eliminate any possibility of really having a reasonable chance to recall somebody's position if they engage in activity that's not good. So that's why I suggested this number be much lower. 5% still is a very high number. So just to give everybody kind of a basis, there are about 15,000 registered voters in Scituate. About 3,000 to 4,000 vote in a town election for the select board or the people on the vote. So 5% of 15,000 would be, what, 750? Is that the number? That's still a pretty high bar of signatories needed to have a recall. So that's why I think we should change this number. Thank you.
Lady at the center mic. Not yet. Okay. The issue before the meeting now is whether to amend the required signatures for a recall. Any further discussion on that amendment? Yes, sir.
I'm Matt Mulder, 36 Lawston Terrace. I was just, I'm not for the amendment because it seems that 15%, am I correct in thinking it's just signatures? They don't have to show up at a certain time and place to vote for a recall. You just need to get them to sign any time, any place at their convenience. And to me, that seems like a reasonable bar to do a recall. I worry that a very small percentage would enable relatively small group of people who have a specific issue that they're worried about to have an undue influence on the process, whereas 15% seems like it would be more something that affects a large percentage of the town, and it seems like 15 seems like a more reasonable number than 5 to me, so I would be against this particular amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. We have further discussion on whether to accept the amendment. Mr. Gibson.
Just to clarify for folks, the Charter Review Committee did not recommend a change here. It was always 15% in our charter. The only thing you did, you'll see that red line there, is we just clarified it was 15% written. We added the numerical numbers there. The committee did discuss this, though, and we felt, for exactly what the gentleman just said, that 5% would be, or any number lower than 15. We didn't throw anything out. Anything lower than 15 would run into potential special interest, or if someone had an issue with their own election, that could potentially drum up support for it. So we felt that 15 was a reasonable number. That's why we did not propose any change to the charter.
We have before us again the motion to amend the quantum for a recall. Any further discussion of that issue? The motion to amend. Yes, ma'am, on my right.
Suzanne O'Brien, 8 Bonnie Briar Circle. I would say to leave the amount at 15%. 5%, as other speakers have just indicated, is such a low bar. You could have a really small handful of people rallying, and the integrity of our elections is of paramount importance, and I say we keep the 15% as the review committee also wanted to keep it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to make one more comment. Again, this isn't, you're requiring the person to stand for election again. You're not, the recall position doesn't throw the person out. They stand for election again, choosing they want to. But again, I just want to reiterate, only about 15% of the town votes. So you're requiring a vote to have a recall, and it just seems too high. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment? I see no one at the microphones for this issue. All those in favor of the amendment, which would change the quantum of vote to initiate a recall, say aye. Those opposed say no. The amendment fails. We're back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion? Ms. Burbine.
Ann Burbine, 10 Pennycrest Road. I move the question.
Motion is to move the question. 2/3 vote is required. This will cut off any further debate on the main motion. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It's a unanimous vote. We move now to a vote on the main issue, which is to accept the recommendations of the Charter Review Committee as set forth in the Advisory Committee report. All those in favor of amending the charter as suggested, say aye. Aye. Those against the amendment, say nay. It's a unanimous vote to amend the charter and send it on to the legislature. Thank you. Next article is Yes, yeah. The next article is Article 13, which is the granting or accepting of an easement on Border Street. We'll hear from the Board of Selectmen. Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that we indefinitely postpone this article.
Have a motion to indefinitely postpone and a second. Any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The board is recommending to indefinitely postpone this article due to the new information that's come before us, that there are new owners at 50 Border Street, and we would like to allow them time to understand the issue and hope to bring this back before town meeting at the annual town meeting.
Any further discussion on the motion to indefinitely postpone? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor of indefinitely postponing action on this article, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. It's a unanimous vote to postpone. We move now to our last article, which is Article 14, special legislation for home rule legislation to appoint retired police officers. May we have a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town petition the general court to adopt the following legislation as outlined in the warrant, which the legislature may vary in form and substance within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition as set forth to allow retired police officers to work police details.
We have a motion. We have a second. We have a second. Discussion on the motion. Let's hear from the advisory committee next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This article would authorize the Select Board to file home rule legislation with the legislator to allow for the employment of retired police officers as special police officers in the town. The mandatory retirement age for the police officers is 65. Like other communities, Scituate Police is looking to offer the opportunity for officers from the age of 65 to 70 to serve as special police officers. These officers would work details such as construction sites and special events, as well as, and importantly, serve as mentors to the younger officers. The retired officers would be capped at 1,200 hours per year and paid the standard hourly rate for detail work. They would not be eligible for benefits, nor would this have any impact on their current retirement. Therefore, there's no additional cost associated with the proposal, but instead provides a pool of experienced officers to perform work in an area where the available pool of part-time candidates is shrinking due to new regulations. The advisory committee agreed unanimously that this was a great opportunity to offer our Scituate police officers that have served this community well the ability to extend their service in an area of great need. Essentially a win-win. The advisory committee recommends approval of this article by unanimous vote 8-0.
Thank you. Further discussion on the article?
Mr. Moderator, I would just also like to say that the Board of Selectmen unanimously supports approval of this motion.
Any further discussion? Lady on my left.
Heather Clark, 60 Brockton Avenue. My question is there a law or regulation that would prevent us from utilizing civilian guards for this purpose?
Do we have an answer to that question? Mr. Boudreau?
Sorry, this one doesn't concern me, so I was over in the corner. There is no law on flag people. What we've found is two things. One, under the prevailing wage, it costs almost the same to hire a flag person as it does to hire a police officer. And two, you do not get the same level of compliance with a flag officer as you do with a uniformed police officer. So we can hire flagmen. Under our police contract, we have to hire the police details first, and there is no cost savings if you hire a flagman.
Can I ask a question?
You certainly may.
Can you actually tell us the difference in the prevailing wage between hiring a police officer and hiring a
I could probably look it up. I don't have it off the top of my head. But
okay, yeah.
We could find it.
Ballpark, yeah. I mean, because I think that if there's savings to be had.
Last time I looked, it was a couple of dollars an hour. It wasn't much.
Okay. Any further discussion on the proposal for special legislation for retired police officers? Seeing no one at the mics, this requires a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. There being no votes, we'll have that, call that a unanimous vote. I ask for a motion to dissolve the meeting. Have a motion to dissolve. All in favor? Good night.